Ranking Arc Raiders maps by how livable they are. Now I hear you asking, what do I mean by livability? Well, if we look at all these places before the world went to crap and all the Arc came down, and analyzed each of them based on residential housing, how well off they were as a society, which map would be the best to live in? First off, I just want to go over some basic knowledge of Arc Raiders and its economics. This might turn into a little bit of geography lesson, but it's important, trust me. It's obvious the game takes place in some southern European country, more specifically Italy, and even more specifically around the city of Naples. And to verify this, we can see the volcano at the lower left part of the map perfectly lines up with the actual Mount Vesuvius, which is where Pompeii happened as well, which is pretty cool. And looking around the map more, Naples International Airport also lines up with Spaceport, and people theorize that Buried City is meant to be representative of Caserta, just north and more towards the mountain. But with where the Spaceport is located, I think it makes more sense for Buried City to just be where the city of Naples is. And for real life, there's really no hydroelectric dams around Naples anywhere, so for dam battlegrounds, But for Blue Gate, I guess someplace up towards Arienzo, Santa Maria Vico, or San Felice Cancello would make the most sense for being up towards the mountains with a lot of open land. Now, Naples isn't generally considered a rich city by itself, but it is one of Italy's largest city with a decent economic standing. And most of that money comes from tourism, agriculture, trade and import, and industries such as shipbuilding and aircraft, with emerging tech and renewable energy trades growing rapidly. And in Arc Raiders, this makes sense, with a lot of tech and energy labs in Stella Montis especially, the Data Vault and Blue Gate, and hell, the giant fucking spaceship tower and spaceport, and you get the idea. If we lived in a time where these locations were still operational, warehouses up and running, families work in the shops, which one would be the best to live in? Let's just start with our first map, Dam Battlegrounds. In terms of residential and living spaces, there are three main options for us: the Pale Apartments, Ruby Residence, and the Patton House. For Raider outposts and more remnants of the New World, we'll mostly just be ignoring them for the main point of this video, but let's just dig in. At the Pale Apartments, we have two buildings, both with 3 stories and fairly open room designs with full kitchens, bedrooms, but have rather dysfunctional, I wouldn't even call these bathrooms. And for the Ruby Residence, they're pretty much identical to the Pale Apartments. 2 buildings, 3 stories, and the same layout for all the rooms and appliances. But for the Patton House, it gets a little bit more interesting. We have 4 stories this time with a semi-functional elevator, and while a lot of the rooms seem unfinished with a bit of scaffolding here and there, the rooms that do have stuff in them are nice. Maybe slightly more cramped than the other 2 apartment suburbs, but here we actually have a full shower. Still no toilet though, so I guess they just expect you to do it in the shower. Maybe there's a hole at back, but full air conditioning through the whole building and a couple of pianos here and there. And with the Patton House's close proximity to the actual dam and its hydroelectric workstations, I'd imagine this would be where they would house the workers, or some of the higher staffing suits who work at the local workplaces. And that same train of thought can also go for the Pale Apartments and Ruby Residence too. Now, there's no schools or form of shops or any regular residential housing. All there really is the water treatment facility, the hydroponics in the swamp, and the hydroelectric generator. This generally isn't the best place to raise a family, but if you're just a solo worker here, there's plenty of job opportunities, and for the 3 apartments, they'd serve pretty well as temporary housing, which I assume would come with the job. So with efficient hydroponics coming from the swamp, plenty of electricity generated from the dam, back when it would be full at least, and a stream of clean water through the water treatment facility, we'd have a good flow of fresh food, plenty of clean water, and environmentally friendly power to pump to all of the local cities and towns. This is where we can assume Buried City, Spaceport, and all of the other maps get most of their power from, and with a big dam like that, yeah, it makes sense. And while this wouldn't be the best place to live with your family or live long term, as a lone worker clocking 6 months on, 6 months off, there's plenty of job opportunities around here. I'd give Dam Battlegrounds a B tier. And secondly, we move on to Buried City, and out of all the other maps, at first glance, we can assume that this one might be the best, being a whole city and whatnot. As for living spaces, there are a ton of small residential buildings all over the city, along with the Grandioso apartments, and even a heap of buried properties under the sand southeast. But scanning the map, Buried City is pretty well off. There's a full modern hospital, a pretty big library, research and space travel labs, a town hall, plenty of warehouses, train stations, stations, gas stations, and markets around, and all the suburbs are pretty well split from services, residential, and industrial. Now, for a lot of the basic living spaces in the city, they're all very similar, being stacked together in a cozy, cramped way, but all of the buildings have multiple stories, decently open rooms, with a lot of the amenities that you would need, and having all of the Italian architectural style all around, with the arches, the pretty tiles on every floor, and the use of a lot of oranges, yellows, blues, and greens. The whole city is gorgeous. But moving on, let's take a look at the Grandioso apartments. These are some of the largest, non-generic housing apartments on the map, and the Grandiosos in particular are also 2 buildings right next to each other. But instead of 3 or 4 stories like we expect, these look like they have about 8. It's hard to tell for sure being covered in sand, but if we look where these car park shading is, we can guess that both of these buildings are about 10 stories each. Heading inside, these rooms are a lot more spacious than the rest of the city, and just to note, they do have working aircon for every single room. Also, elevator, check, but again, no bathrooms anywhere, or a single toilet, so that's weird. But other than the housing, a big ass hospital is a win, along with other services like the markets and the Galleria, which is just a shopping mall, and the gas station to the north, and all of the other ones I mentioned before. And with all the subway stations and highways, transport in and out of the city is super accessible. And with all of the warehouses and the above ground train station, it seems like imports and trades for the city is easy enough as well. And as a quick note, if we look out of the city, we can see a bunch of wind turbines, and with that, along with all the power being generated back at the dam, this city's thriving. You can also see Spaceport's giant launch tower from here, which is pretty cool. Buried City looks like it would be doing quite well in all aspects. Tons of job opportunities from the markets, warehouses, labs, hospital, and subway stations. Plenty of probably affordable housing with all the residential buildings scattered about. Obviously, if the streets weren't covered in sand, this would probably be a very beautiful city to live in. So with that, I think Buried City is going to be our first and only S tier. And now onto Spaceport. This one might be our worst one yet. I mean, have you tried living at the airport? Me neither, but I can assume this shit would be hard. And for a motherfucking spaceport? Yeah, hell no. But we might as well go through and explain it. As for the buildings, no living quarters, plenty of warehouses, hangars, maintenance and storage locations, the arrival and departure buildings, and of course the launch towers themselves. Now with no living quarters or anything, it gets a little bit difficult. And even though it is a spaceport, we can assume that it runs very similarly to any modern airport. All the workers, security, reception staff, mechanics and engineers would probably either go home after the shifts or work night shift, so everything can be running 24/7 like a regular airport. So with that, there'd be no need to provide housing like the dam does. And if we take that and assume that every building other than the arrival and departure buildings and the car park are inaccessible unless given private or security access, our best bets are to live out of a car in the car park, which has its perks. You wouldn't have to pay any rent other than maybe parking fines, and there'd be easy public bathroom access in the buildings. Or secondly, we live basically homeless in any of the 2 publicly accessible buildings. Just like that the one Tom Hanks movie, the Terminal, I think, which might not be too bad. I mean, it's a spaceport. I don't know how expensive space travel would really be in this time period, but all the passengers have to be pretty well off, you know? You could just sit around, shake your head around for a bit, you might get a couple of pennies to get a decently overpriced meal from one of the local cafes or whatnot, or maybe pull out your recorder and do some busking to earn a couple of cash. Hey, it ain't an easy life, but it's honest work. But jokes aside, yes, Spaceport would suck. D tier.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
Do you often feel like something in your life is missing? Do you find yourself longing for something to cheer you up? Well, here at Good Stuff Co., we have the answer for you. Channel membership. By becoming a member of the It's Tab YouTube channel, we can guarantee a boost to daily satisfaction rates. With early access to videos for up to 2 days, your name at the end of every video, and your endearing love and support for my work and financial status. I've never seen anything more worth my money, and all of this and more could be yours for the low price of $4 Australian, or whatever it is in your local currency. Products you can afford. Buy it. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
We now return to the Transformers.
Moving on, we are now at Blue Gate, and this one is much more my style. Beautiful open countrysides and gorgeous mountains in the distance. This one has potential. Taking a look at the map, there are a couple of decent places for housing. The big ones are of course the village at the northwest, Olive Grove and the nearby homestead towards the south, the abandoned housing project towards the east, and a couple of small cottages and little shacks scattered about. First, let's take a look at the homestead near Olive Grove. Other than the rich soil prime for farmland, there are a couple of one-roomed houses or shacks or homesteads scattered about. Or if you're lucky, sometimes they come in more than one room. And it's a cozy little neighborhood, you know, it's out of the way, it's quiet, out in the countryside. It's where I imagine my friend's Italian grandma lives every time he brings her up. But heading to the abandoned housing project, we can see that they were set to build 3 modern houses, already set with solar panels and satellites. And they have AC units set on the outside, but not in the inside yet, for some reason. If they would have got these buildings finished, we can guess that they would have been about 2 or 3 stories, not including the basement. With how some of the apartment buildings are, maybe these would have been apartments as well, but where the stairs are located on the outside, my guess is probably not. But they're in a good spot, close to the really pretty lake just northeast, the Pilgrim's Peak radio station, all the warehouses and the data vault, which we'll talk about soon. But this makes me think they might have been building these as housing for the workers and the warehouses or the research labs, because these houses are a lot more modern and expensive than all the other houses around the map. But at the end of the day, who really knows? Then we come to Village as our last half-decent residential area for Blue Gate. And similarly to Buried City, these are all cozy, cramped, and tall buildings. A lot of the floors are mostly just one big room and plenty of pianos, of course, but still 0 bathrooms. But at least it makes up for it being in a beautiful spot right by the mountains with a little river running by. But if we look a little closer, we can notice a lot of trash bags in the rooms and in the streets, and full to the brim dumpsters and wheelie bins all around. Perhaps this is maybe just a byproduct of the collapse and when the arc came down. Or maybe, just maybe, this is some slight storytelling where the local council or government under control of this whole area maybe had their priorities elsewhere than worrying about the village's waste management. Because deep in this gorgeous countryside with dense forest, ancient city ruins, and rich farmland, why do we also have a very large highway leading into a very large checkpoint, leading into a very large data vault, with a massive warehouse complex, massive radio station, and massive underground labs with modern housing being built? I just have a couple of questions. What caused the presumable earthquake at Broken Earth? What is in the data vault? There's a lot of cars piled up at the checkpoint, seemingly it was pretty popular. And why this specific area in the beautiful green hills? Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but if there's one thing I'm mostly interested in this game, it's got to be the lore. So maybe we'll eventually get an explanation, but anyways, it's a gorgeous spot, probably very cheap housing, farming could be fun. Blue Gate is A tier. And as our final map, Stella Montis, who cares? It's a big ass lab. Maybe there's living quarters for the scientists, but fuck it, F tier. And there we have it, every single Arc Raiders map as of 2025 ranked by livability. Like and subscribe. Fun fact, this video was heavily inspired by Annie Austin and a lot of his videos, so go check him out, subscribe to him. I think for a game like Arc Raiders, it's good to step back and take a look at it from a different angle. Ignore all the PvP, looting, extracting and stressing, and just look at it through a different lens. And I think this video has really made me appreciate this game a lot more, especially with the maps. Hell, this was literally the first time I've even been to the back of Spaceport in the trenches and the trench towers and whatnot. And I didn't even know there was a full-ass lake by Pilgrim's Peak that you could walk through. It's absolutely gorgeous. And especially going back to what it was before the collapse and the arc came down, and guessing what it was like for an actual person living in these places, how they worked and functioned as a society. It's really cool. And if you think about it, Arc Raiders timeline isn't actually that far off from